Welcome to another edition of International Real Estate Radio. I'm Justina Saul.
And I'm Dominic Pickering.
Today we have an interview with Carlos Colombo from Colombo Hurd Immigration Law Firm to discuss EB-5, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think it's a subject that needs to be taken away from all of the other immigration visas because there is so much to learn and there is so much misunderstanding with it. So with that, welcome, Carlos.
Thank you.
Talk to us a little bit, if you would, please. What is EB-5?
So EB-5 is an employment-based fifth preference category visa. It's actually for permanent residency in the U.S. based on investment. So a lot of times, like you said, EB-5 is misunderstood because people believe that the original intention of EB-5 was to create investment in the U.S. and through that investment that you would get a green card or U.S. permanent residency. But the reality is that EB-5s are based primarily on the creation of jobs. Right. So that's why it's called EB, employment-based. So the main requirement of an EB-5 is that the investment that the foreign national is going to be providing to the U.S. create jobs. People misunderstand that and believe that it's an investment-based visa. So there are different kinds of EB-5s. You have EB-5s through regional centers, right, or you have EB-5s through your own company and your own investment. What is the reality of EB-5? We have to understand the reality of how EB-5s work and the history of EB-5s because there's a lot of misinformation out there, unfortunately, mostly spread through media stories that love to create drama, right, and focus on the negative things when most attorneys and most regional centers try to do the right thing with EB-5.
Well, that's good to hear. So what are the risks and the rewards of EB-5?
The reward obviously is getting your green card. That's when people look at EB-5 is because they want to live permanently in the United States. And because of our current immigration system, there are very limited numbers of ways that a person can legally move to the U.S. If you don't have a strong, close family relationship, if you don't have a very significant resume and a company willing to sponsor you, it's difficult to get that green card or permanent residency. So because the immigration system in the U.S. has gotten more and more difficult in the last 10 years, EB-5s have grown.
It seems as though it's such a catchphrase these days. Every developer you speak to is establishing an EB-5. Everybody that you talk to is talking about EB-5. How long has the program actually been around?
It's been around since the early 90s, but it was not utilized. Why? Because other visas like L1s, labor certifications, other methods of immigrating were easier for people. You could have a small company, open up a branch, and most likely you would get your green card. That's not happening anymore. Also because a lot of developers and companies saw EB-5 as a potentially easy way to finance their projects. In reality, that's not really true. And that's where a lot of the misunderstanding has occurred. Most projects in EB-5 need to create enough jobs. So just because you have a real estate project, for example, it doesn't mean that it's going to create enough jobs to justify using EB-5.
Tell us more about regional centers and what they are.
So first, statistically, more than 90% of EB-5s are done through regional centers. A regional center is a company, a private entity that is approved by immigration to accept foreign investment into EB-5 projects and essentially give out the green cards. So if you look at a regional center, they can have different models. It can be an equity model or a loan model. Okay. So if you have a loan model, regional center is essentially like a mini bank making a loan to a project. If you have an equity model, it means that that regional center is investing in some kind of project. And you are a limited partner, a small investor within that larger regional center.
And is one necessarily better than the other?
It depends. It depends on the goals and expectations that an investor may have. Some investors like to take a little bit more risk for a higher return. So an equity investment may be more attractive, but they need to understand that there has to be some kind of exit strategy if they want to get their money back. Unfortunately, historically, a lot of equity models have not had very good exit strategies. And so that's where I think a little bit of the misunderstanding on EB5 has arisen, is that investors were not really looking into the exit strategies for equity investments. Loan models, on the other hand, have a fairly clear exit strategy because it's a specific period. The term of the loan is very specific, 6 years usually. And in that 6 years, the project has to repay that loan to the regional center, and the investors get their money back that way.
Okay, so that's the crux of, I think, where all of the misinformation is. Before we go into that, because I want to talk further about it, explain, if you would, that this is obviously done with the thought of, with the intention of getting a green card out of it. How long does it take from the beginning of the process to where you get a green card? And then let's discuss, success rates and pulling your equity out.
So currently it takes about a year to get a green card through the EB5 process. That green card is going to be conditional for 2 years. Why? Immigration has that regulation in place to avoid fraud, make sure that the investment was truly made.
Right.
So they're going to review that in 2 years. And also to make sure that the jobs were created, that project created the jobs it says it was going to create. If neither of those two things happen, investment was not made or jobs were not created, then you could lose your green card, which is why, again, you have to look at regional centers that are historically been successful and know what they're doing.
Right.
So I would caution people into getting into regional centers that have no experience, looking at the professionals that are working with that regional center, the immigration attorneys, securities attorneys, etc., the economist, to make sure that they have a conservative business plan and conservative projections for job creation, because otherwise you could lose your green card.
So what are the success rates of regional centers?
When you look at regional centers, the reality is there's a handful that have a long history and have a successful history.
Right.
The good ones have 100% approvals for the most part.
Approvals on the green cards?
On the green cards.
Okay. And have shown a track record then that they have been able to not only get the green cards but get all of their investors out of that conditional period.
That's correct.
Okay.
There's more than 400 regional centers that have been approved by immigration, but again, a handful are truly successful, because like in any industry where there's money, there's always going to be sharks out there. So the bad reputation that some critics have placed on EB5, it's based probably on that, but that's in any industry.
It is, yes.
And so it's not unique to EB5, so it shouldn't be a shock to people that there are some folks trying to take advantage of EB5 investors.
It's always the few make a very loud voice for the industry, but I think that's where the issue is, isn't it? That if they're the only ones having a loud voice, where do we get the education so that it takes away the fear, and how then do you do it correctly?
And I think that it's people like us that know we're experts and we know what we're doing, and we protect the foreign investor. The good regional centers that have strong reputations want to succeed for the investor, and they want to protect the investor.
Right.
They're not, when you have regional centers that are controlled by a developer, that could be dangerous, because they may not be looking out for the best interest of the investor.
Is it always dangerous? I mean, is it something that you shy away from, or is it just, again, a matter of just being careful?
It's like any investment. If you're going to purchase a home, you want to make sure it's in a good area, that it has the potential for developing equity in the future. Is there growth potential in that neighborhood? You have to do an analysis. If you don't, not every real estate investment is going to result in a high return. So any investment that you make, you have to do your due diligence. I think primarily because people are looking for the green card as their first goal in an EB5, oftentimes they ignore their due diligence on the business side.
Right. Talk to us a little bit there. Another 2 levels of investment for an EB5. Can you explain the difference between the two? And then I want to go back to what we were discussing earlier about an exit strategy. So, somebody then has their green card, and then how do they start looking to get their money out? But how much money needs to go in?
So there's 2 types of investments that are qualified. $1 million in any area in the United States, or $500,000 in what is called a targeted employment area, which is an area that is designated by the local government of every state as an area of high unemployment or a rural area. The reality is most EB5s, 95% or more, are $500,000 EB5s because there's plenty of areas that qualify as TEA today. That may not have been the case 10 years ago, but today it is. And that's because the way that targeted employment areas is calculated have allowed for basically joining of different areas into one. So you could have a very nice area with low unemployment, and the tract next door can have a little bit higher unemployment, and you combine them and you can get a $500,000 area.
Right.
So, for the listeners, they shouldn't think that because you're doing a $500,000 investment that it's a bad area, that it's a rundown area. There's plenty of EB5 projects in very, very nice areas.
It doesn't necessarily mean then just because you're doing an EB5 visa that you are spending $500,000 and you just need to write that off because there's this is not a business model. It's simply a visa model. So what you're saying is that there is a good way to get a good chance that you're going to get your money back at the end of it.
It depends. I mean, people need to understand that anytime you make an investment, there's risk that you could lose it all. So there are never guarantees in life, especially when you're making an investment. And this is not supported directly by the U.S. government, guaranteed by the U.S. government. That's a misconception some people have, that they think that EB5s are backed in some way by the U.S. government. This is approved by the U.S. government, but it's not guaranteed in any way on your return. However, good regional centers have exit strategies. That's something that in fact, the EB5 community has demanded over the past few years, that regional centers have a clear strategy for people to get out of that investment after a certain period of time. The reason why it has to be usually at least 4, 5, 6 years is because between the time you get your green card, you remove those conditions after 2 years. That's easily going to be a 3-year process.
Right.
And you need to give the regional center the time to create the jobs. Also, these regional centers are businesses.
Right.
And they need to make money because otherwise they wouldn't be doing this. So you have to give all parties enough time to get what they want. And at that point, you can have an exit strategy. So in the loan model situation, it's usually a 6-year term because that's enough time to get all the jobs created, make sure that everybody that invested gets their permanent green cards. At the end of the 6 years, the project that the regional center loaned the money to will repay that loan, has to legally repay that loan, otherwise they're in default.
Right.
And the investors will get their money back. So, perfect example is you go buy a home and you get a mortgage on that home. The loan that is made by the bank is secured by collateral, which is the house.
Right.
This loan model is essentially the same. You have the regional center being the bank in that example that is making a loan to a particular project, let's say a hotel project or an infrastructure project of a power plant. That power plant is the house in the mortgage example. And you have the 6 years to repay that loan. At the end of the 6 years, if you don't repay it, the bank is going to take your home. In this case, the regional center is going to take whatever collateral was pledged. It could be the power plant, the assets of the power plant, whatever it could be. So that model tends to be a little bit more easy for EB5 investors to understand it.
Would it be something that when if you were looking at this just as a business model, what type of interest or what type of return would you look to get on your money?
That's a good question. EB5s tend not to be investments that are made to make money.
Right.
Okay. So that should be a red flag for a lot of people. If you think you can make millions and millions of dollars with EB5, you're in the wrong business. The goal of EB5 is for you to get your green card, make sure you get your permanent green card after 2 years, and try to get your money back. So the regional center in the loan model is going to charge, let's say, 5, 6, 7% interest rate, which tends to be lower on a commercial loan than a bank. They're going to keep the majority of that interest rate. That's their business. They're going to pass on to the investor usually less than 1%. So you're not going to make money.
Right.
Your money's going to basically stay where it is. And a lot of people look at it and say, look, it's in US dollars. I'm getting 1% a year. It's not great, but it's something. And I have my green card. I should get my money back in 6 years. So it's a fairly low risk.
Expectations, isn't it?
It's fairly low risk for them. So people tend to like that model.
Right. When somebody gets their green card, what makes it? I know there's something that's, each visa is a little bit different, but this gets more than just the one person a green card, does it not?
Yes. So the principal applicant gets their green card, spouse, and children under 21.
And so I think it's probably common knowledge when you hear about EB5 over the past few years, it's exploded in Asia, specifically in China. So everybody knows that we've got lots of Chinese people who are investing now in EB5 centers. Where do you see around the world that this is, a great model and that we see a lot of people coming in and entering it?
So, China has been historically by far the number one country that has investors in EB5, South Korea. But then you have other countries that are growing, India, the UK, and then in Latin America, Brazil, particularly Venezuela, has also been a growing market. The BRIC countries tend to be, higher populations and where there's been an accumulation of wealth in the last 10 years.
Tell us again for the audience, what are the BRIC countries?
Well, BRIC countries are countries like China, Brazil, India that are developing.
Russia.
Russia's
Yes.
Russia's another example.
So what should the professionals that are listening be looking out for in order to promote an EB5?
So if you have clients that are interested in EB5, be careful with people that promise too much, obviously, especially on returns, and work with folks that have a history of doing this successfully. Like I said, most successful regional centers have close to 100% or 100% approvals. For an investor, if you have a project like that, the only way you're going to lose your case is if you have a bad lawyer that doesn't know what they're doing, or a regional center that doesn't know what they're doing. If you have a combination of good attorney and a good regional center, and your money is clean, because that's one of the things that people have to prove is that their money was from a legitimate source.
Right.
Then you should get your green card. And so if you look at EB5 from an U.S. immigration perspective, it's really the VIP way of immigrating to the U.S. It's the red carpet method. You are helping the U.S. economy because you're helping to create jobs. It has a positive economic impact, and you're welcomed as an investor to the U.S. So If you're considering other visas like an L1 or an E2, you have to consider what are your ultimate goals. If you want to live permanently in the US and you have the funds to do this, you should strongly consider EB-5.
So, last point, fair to say then that not all immigration attorneys are well versed in EB-5? Is that correct?
That's correct. A lot of people talk about EB-5. A lot of developers, a lot of attorneys. But when you look at the numbers, I think the highest we've ever reached is about 8,000, 8,500 in a year.
Really?
So that should tell you that not everybody that is talking about EB-5 is doing EB-5.
Certainly does, because you hear a lot of talk about it, and
right.
Yeah, you would think that it was a lot more people that were getting in. Fantastic interview. Thank you for taking the time to speak to everybody. If anybody has any questions, obviously we recommend that one of the first things, the first thing that you do is find an immigration attorney that you can speak to and get your clients to, and make sure that you have very strong partners. If anybody is interested in reaching Mr. Colombo, you can do so. What would be the best way for anybody to reach you if they were?
If they're abroad, probably the best way would be through our website, which is Colombo Hurd. Hurd is HURD.com.
Mr. Colombo, thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
But we're going to have to leave it there for this edition of International Real Estate Radio. Thanks for listening. See you next time.